Let's pull some stuff up here. Get ready for our stream today. I got my hat on, my trucker hat on. This is a hat that is very special to me. It looks like a trucker hat. It is a trucker hat, but it has cork. It's got cork on the front. I absolutely love it. My favorite hat of all time, and I'm wearing it today. If you really hate the hat, you can let me know in the chat. You can say, no hat. Hat is terrible. You look like a douche, and I'll take off the hat. But I really like the hat. We're just going to chill out here just a couple minutes. We're going to wait for some folks to join. I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to see this from the beginning. In the meantime, if you've got anything to say, I love to see it coming in the chat. Oh, check it out! Already got a little chat going on. Makes me so happy to see people posting on stuff about the chat, posting on the chat about things. That's what I mean to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Give me a sec to just set up a couple windows here. Cork sneakers. That sounds amazing. Yeah, this hat was not purchased in Portugal, but I had another cork hat that I did get in Portugal, and I lost it. Like, I'm pretty sure, like a TSA, in the airport. And I went back and I was like, I think I lost it. Like, I bet you don't see a lot of these. Like, I lost a cork hat, and they were like, nope, you didn't lose it here. And I filled out the form and everything. Well, I'm sure I left it at TSA, but I never got it back. So this was a gift. I really appreciated it, because it was like, when I lost cork hat number 1, I was like close to heartbroken. Oh, I appreciate it so much, Michael, recommending me to people. I'm so happy to help you understand. John, I have not created videos on carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur cycles. Maybe I will at some point. Right now, I'm particularly focused on videos that get folks ready for this test. It's called the TEAS. It's a test in the United States that helps people get ready for many different healthcare professions. So I have lots of other videos on YouTube, but right now, most of the videos that I'm making are focused on the TEAS. They're designed to give folks like everything they need to get ready for the TEAS. So I'm sorry I don't have videos on those. Maybe I'll make them in the future. But luckily, the sulfur, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur cycles are not really things you need to know for this particular exam, which is good, because there's a lot of stuff that people do need to know for this exam. It's a very challenging exam. Okay, so we'll get started in just a second. Give me 1 second here. I'm gonna turn the volume down a little bit. Diana Ortiz, how's it going? Great to see you. I love seeing familiar faces here. Well, familiar names. Now, Diana, I'm assuming I'm saying that right, because I'm not pronouncing the H. But let me know if I'm saying your name. Yeah, there we go. Okay, fair enough. Spent a lot of time in Argentina, so I do know to speak a little, how to say a few words. Anyway, okay, so if you have any questions, stuff that you particularly want me to go over, go ahead and put it in the chat. What we're going to do today is we are going to look at biological organization, which is basically the stuff that that living things are made out of, the different pieces that living things are made out of. Okay, so we're going to talk through that, and then we're going to do 15 practice questions on this, because here's the thing. I say this all the time. At the end of the day with the TEAS, it's about the questions that you can answer. Okay, and I know people spend a lot of time sometimes reading books and watching videos, and that can be fine. But the thing is, like, way too many people spend hours and days and weeks and months watching teas videos, reading teas books, and then they take the teas and they don't do well, right? And you like read on Facebook forums, people are like, nothing. I studied all the wrong stuff. I didn't know how to answer any of the questions. I spent months and months studying. Well, look, here's a problem. You got to practice questions. Like, at the end of the day, you only do well in the teas if you can answer the questions correctly. So you've got to do lots and lots of practice questions. You've got to make sure that you're understanding how to answer questions, because like you memorize all these definitions, right? Like, oh, the definition of atomic number is this. The definition of isotope is that. And sometimes I see people that have their like little flashcards, and that's fine, right? They have their little flashcard and they have all the definitions, but the teas is never going to be like, what's the definition of atomic number? They're going to ask you that in another way. And so that's why I'm all about the questions. I'm all about a little bit of teaching. Teaching is great, but then I'm all about banging through the questions to make sure that you can take what you have learned, that you can take your knowledge and you can use that to answer questions. So that's how, like, whenever I teach or in my videos, you can find on my website, I'm always like, teach a little bit, question, 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 question. Because it's like, if you're not able to answer the questions, like, I'm not doing my job, right? So that's why we're going to be so focused on these questions. Okay, great. If there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, let me know in the chat. And let me tell you what we're going to do. Today, we're talking about biological organization, organisms, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, organelles, macromolecules. And then what we're going to be doing tomorrow, I'm just going to double check my schedule, but I think it's going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to do cells. We're going to do cells and organelles and the function of the organelles. This is stuff that is like super, super, super hot topic on the teas. This stuff that we're going to talk about today, this is also a hot topic on the teas. But like cells, the organelles, the things that the organelles do, super, super important hot topic. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. To get ready for that, I have a podcast that's free on YouTube. I'll send out the link later. To get ready, you can listen to the podcast. You can do it while you're driving, do it while you're working out, while you're cooking dinner, whatever. Listen to that. That will teach you all the information that you need to know about cells to get you ready for doing the practice problems tomorrow. We're primarily going to do practice problems tomorrow because I have so much of the information that you can learn on your own by watching the video or listening to it as a podcast. And then we'll mostly focus on working through a bunch of practice questions tomorrow so that it becomes very, 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 very second nature. Now, Michael asks, is this in the life and physical sciences section of the ATI book? It absolutely is. It is. Let's look at this piece of garbage here. I have the piece of garbage that nobody has ever learned from in the history of the world. This is Unit 3. It's a beginning of Unit 3 science, life and physical science. This is S.2.1, describes cell structure, function, and organization. If you have this book, it's page 203. It's page 203. So we're going to be talking about that stuff, but primarily we're going to be looking at the type of practice questions on this stuff that show up on the teas. Okay. And if you look at official ATI practice questions, official ATI practice tests, they're filled with questions about this stuff. And I have a bunch of questions that are just like what you're going to see on the teas. Okay. I think how many people do we have here? Great. We got 14, 15 people. We are ready to get started. Okay. Give me 1 second to set my windows up here and we're going to get going. All right. Okay. So as I said, at the end of the day, we are going to be talking about the pieces that make up living things. That is what biological organization means at a really high level. Okay. Quick reminder, if you like how I teach, you can check out my TEAS resources, teasinOneday.com. I have a really good chemistry course there that teaches you all of the most important chemistry topics that you need to know for the TEAS. And as I make these biology videos, I'm adding them to the course there. Okay, so just so you know. Here's a little diagram that tells us about the levels of organization of the different things that make up organisms, that make up living things. Now, you know that the TEAS always likes to use complicated language, complicated words, when simple ones would do. Okay, so I like to say living things, dogs and plants and horses and people. I like to say living things. The TEAS, of course, likes to say organisms, because that's a sort of more scientific way. Okay, so if you look at this diagram here, and in a minute we're going to break this down into smaller pieces, but this diagram gives us sort of the big picture. We have here in the middle, we have an organism, okay, and that is a person, as a human being. Now imagine that we had sort of a magic way to zoom in to this person. Okay, we can kind of see through their skin, and we can also sort of magnify a little bit. And if we zoomed into that person, we are kind of going in reverse through this diagram. We're actually going this way. As we zoom in, we're going counterclockwise around the circle. So we start with a person here, the organism, and then we're going to zoom in. And then what you can see is the diagram is showing some blood vessels. It's showing some kidneys and the urinary bladder. This is what we're seeing here is an organ system. It's a group of organs that have a particular job. Okay. So that's kind of the first thing that we'd see if we zoomed in to a living thing. We'd see groups of organs arranged together. Okay. Now, if we zoomed in even more into those groups of organs, we're going around the circle like this, we'd see individual organs. Okay. So here is a kidney. We're seeing a kidney right here. Now, if we took this kidney and we maybe took, right, look at that area right there, and we zoomed into that, we would be looking at what we call a tissue. Okay? And a tissue is then made up of a bunch of cells. And if you look at this tissue, you can see there are a whole bunch of little sort of round, well, they're sort of square with round things in the middle. The round things are the nucleus. They're made of cells. Now, if we zoomed into the cells even more, we would see that they are made up of little pieces called organelles. Now, organelles, what are they made of? They're made of little building blocks called macromolecules. We'll talk about those in a minute. Macromolecules are very, very big molecules. They are combinations of many different atoms. So this is a big picture view that shows how if we could zoom in to a living thing like a human, first we'd see the whole living thing, the whole organism. Then the next level down, we'd see organ systems, groups of organs. Then we'd see individual organs. Zoom in more, we see individual tissues. Zoom into those tissues, we see cells. Zoom into the cells, we see organelles. Zoom into the organelles, we see macromolecules. And zoom in to the macromolecules, and we see atoms. You might see there's molecules here. I'm not too worried about molecules. We're going to go right from macromolecules to atoms. Now, if you are studying with the ATI book open, you might see that they use slightly different words for some of these things, particularly at the very end. The ATI book says organism, organ system, organ, tissue, cells, and they go right to chemicals. Macromolecules, molecules, atoms, they call them chemicals. Well, but that's the diagram in the ATI book. The thing is, the questions that you get on the ATI tests, on the practice problem, they use different words, right? They don't only use the words that they have in the book. So that's why I'm using diagrams like this, so you get used to different words, because you know how the ATI is. You know how TEAS is. They play dirty. They tell you to learn certain words in the book, but then other words show up on the test. So that's why I want to make sure that you're ready for this. So just to be a little bit more specific, I'm saying we take a look at organelles. What are organelles made of? They're made of macromolecules, and then those are made of atoms. Okay? Sound good? Let's bomb through this real quick. If we zoomed all the way in to living things, we would see many different kinds of atoms. Now we're going to go from the very small to the bigger. Okay? So atoms, and there are many different types of atoms. We call these elements. We have things like carbon, and we have oxygen atoms, and things like that. Put a couple atoms together, and you get what's called a molecule. So here is one oxygen combined with two hydrogen atoms, and we get a molecule. Okay, now we're building stuff up that's a little bit bigger. If we put lots and lots and lots of different atoms together, we get giant clumps of atoms, and we call those macromolecules or big molecules. All right, so macromolecules are giant molecules made of hundreds or thousands of atoms. And there are four main types of macromolecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. We talked about those the other day. All right. So atoms come together to make molecules. Very large molecules are called macromolecules. Proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids are the four categories of macromolecules that make up most living things. Okay, so here we have our macromolecules. Now, you put a whole bunch of different macromolecules together, you get an organelle. And the organelles are the little pieces inside cells. Okay, they have different jobs. So they're organelles like the mitochondria. The mitochondria's job is to help the cell break down food to make energy. You got the nucleus that stores DNA. You've got the cell membrane that kind of protects the cell from the outside, keeps some things in, keeps other things out. Then if you looked at cells and you zoomed into cells, you'd see a bunch of organelles. So cells are made of multiple organelles. Oh. Then, if you put a bunch of cells together, you get a tissue. A tissue is something that is a group of one type of cell. Okay? So, there are different types of tissues that are made of different types of cells. Put a bunch of tissues together, you get an organ. Put a bunch of organs together, you get an organ system. And finally, if you look at an organism or a living thing, you'd see many different organ systems. Okay? So, when we talk about levels of organization, it's all about zooming in from big picture to tiny picture, all the way from a living thing to the tiny atoms that make it up, or about sort of zooming out in the other direction, going from the atoms to the macromolecules, all the way to organ systems and living things. Sometimes this organization chart is shown kind of as a pyramid. And it can be a little bit hard to see. There's some good pictures here, but you might have a little bit of trouble seeing the words. So we start up here with organisms. This is important to commit to memory. Then what comes under organisms, if we zoomed in a little bit more, we would see the organ systems. Then if we zoomed into the organ systems, we'd see the organs. If we zoomed into the organs, we'd see they're made of individual tissues. And you can see some different types of tissues here that are made from different cells. We have some different types of muscle tissue. We have some blood cells here. We have some bone tissue and so forth. If we zoom into tissues, we see different types of cells. If we zoom into cells, we see organelles. And finally, we see molecules. These molecules might be little molecules, they might be macromolecules, but I keep saying this over and over again so it sticks in your head like glue. Organisms, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, organelles, molecules, or macromolecules, right? So it's like each one of those, doom, 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 doom. We zoom in more. They're smaller and smaller, and they make each other up. Okay, great. So that's about it. And now it's going to be time to do some questions. Before we dive into the questions, I want to make sure. Does this make sense? Are there any questions about what we're talking about? If there's one important thing to know, it's to memorize this chart, the order of things: organisms, organ systems, organisms, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, organelles, molecules. But here's the thing, right? The tease is never going to be like, fill in this chart. The tease is going to ask you about this in other ways. And so that's why we're going to do all these practice problems so that you can see how they ask you about this. You need to know this. You need to have this chart committed to memory, but you need to be able to pull in other information to answer the questions. A lot of the information you're going to have to pull in is going to come from your knowledge of anatomy and physiology, and it's going to come from common sense. So it's like you've got to combine this chart that you see right here, that should be in your mind, should be committed to memory. You have to combine this chart with some knowledge of anatomy and physiology and some common sense. Here we go. Let's take a look. What days do I go live? Rhonda, right now, I'm going live whenever I have time. And I'm trying to do a couple times a week, and I always send out an email. Yeah, it's tissues and down where it's tougher. I agree, Michael. We're gonna talk about that in a sec. Rhonda, I try to go live whenever I can, and we will. I send out an email. If you're on my mailing list, sign up at teasindoneday.com, or you can just send me an email, tyler@teasindoneday.com. Okay, so let's get started. Which of the following examples represents the highest level of biological organization? The highest level of biological organization. So the lowest level of biological organization is like the tiny stuff. It's like the atoms and molecules. The highest level is living things. Okay? We don't see a living thing. We don't see atoms here. So we have to figure out where in the middle are we? Now, you know, because you've committed this to memory, it goes living thing, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, organelles, blah, 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 blah. Okay. In order to answer this correctly, we have to know what each of these things are, or we're going to have to be able to eliminate. So cardiomyocyte. What is a cardiomyocyte? It is a type of cell in the heart. What's the circulatory system? Well, that is an organ system. What's the heart? It's an organ. What is the myocardium? It is a tissue in the heart that's made of cardiomyocytes. So, from small to large, cardiomyocytes are the cells. You put a bunch of cardiomyocytes together, you get myocardium, that's a tissue. Put a bunch of different tissues together, you get the heart. Put the heart together with blood vessels and some other stuff, but mostly heart and blood vessels, you get the circulatory system. So that is the biggest or the highest level of biological organization, the circulatory system. Any questions about that? Okay. All living things are composed of cells, tissues, organs, or organ systems. What do you think about this one? I'll give you a sec to think about it. I like these answers that I'm seeing coming in. The answer I'm going to tell you right now is cells. Believe it or not, a lot of people get confused by this, right? But all living things are composed of cells. There are living things like bacteria that are made of nothing but cells. Here's a little bacteria. Here's a bacteria. This bacterium, that looks so messy. That looks awful. I'm not going to do it like this. I'm going to do it like this. This bacterium is made of only one cell. Just one cell. This bacterium is made of just one cell. So this bacterium doesn't have tissues. It doesn't have organs. It has organelles within the cell, but organelles are smaller than a cell. So there are living things that are made of just one cell. But if you don't have cells, you're not a living thing. You don't have to have tissues, you can be a living thing. You don't have to have organs, you can be a living thing. But if you are a living thing, you got to have cells, or at least one cell. But if you don't have cells, you're not a living thing. You're just not, right? That's like one of the definitions of what it means to be a living thing. You are made up of cells. Okay. Now, any other questions? All living things are composed of cells. Living things do not need organs. They don't need organ systems. They do not need tissues, but they do need cells. Okay. Sometimes the TEAS will ask you about this question with diagrams. I think the diagram questions are the hardest. They're very tricky. The first time I saw a TEAS diagram question like this, I got it wrong because I didn't really understand what they're asking. You might see this question asked, you might see a diagram question like this on the TEAS. I want you to be ready. Here's how they expect you to answer, okay? Think about this. I'll give you a sec to think about it. Read it over. Think about it, and then we're gonna talk through it together. I see not quite so many responses as I did in the previous questions, which is totally fine. I'm just guessing that maybe some folks are like not quite so sure about this. And that's totally fine if you're not quite so sure. Okay. We got some answers rolling in and these look good. I just want to talk through this. So here's what we see. We see all of these shapes, all these shapes. This one, this one, this one, this one, and all of these shapes represent cells. Okay. And we know they represent cells because they kind of have this shape, this general shape, and they have a dot in the middle. And so this is probably, this is what I'm saying, this is representing the nucleus. That's where the DNA is kept in the cell. And they all have that shape. So we look at that diagram and we know that these are representative of cells. Now here's the next question. There are cells. So you might think maybe I should choose that because I see cells in the diagram. Now, the question is asking about the highest level of biological organization. So is there anything bigger than a cell that we see here? Yes, we do. We see a bunch of cells together making something up. What is that? When we have a bunch of cells together making something up, it is a tissue. Now, here's the important thing. These are all the same type of cells, okay? We could get an organ if we had many different types of cells all making different tissues. But these are all the same. All these cells, for the most part, look identical. All the same type of cells. These are all the same type of cells, and it's a group of them. So we're looking at a tissue here, okay? That is the highest level. We're not seeing an organ. If we were seeing an organ, we'd see different types of cells coming together to make tissues. We're definitely not seeing an organ system, okay? Which of the following are correctly arranged from the most basic to the highest form of biological organization? Okay. Now, for this, you're going to need to think a little bit about the anatomy and physiology that you previously learned. But there's also a lot of process of elimination that we can do. It's very, very, very important to read these questions correctly. Okay. We are looking from the most basic to the highest form, which in other words means that we are going from smallest to largest. Basic to highest, okay? So let's look through this. These questions are very important to read correctly, okay? What is the smallest unit when you read through these? Smallest is going to be the cell, okay? Right here we have the digestive system. The digestive system is going to be the biggest, so we can cross that right off. We have a cell here. We have the stomach. Well, a stomach is certainly bigger than a cell, so we can cross that off. Now, the gastric mucosa. Maybe you don't quite know how this question works, and you're like, I'm not sure what to choose. Well, but look at this. You're thinking that maybe B is the correct answer. All the way over here, parietal cell is definitely not the largest. The cell is the smallest, so we can cross this off. So that means that our correct choice is parietal cell, gastric mucosa, stomach, digestive system. And that means that we are going from cell to tissue to organ to organ system. C is the correct answer. And this example here is also another type of question that is all over the T's. The diagrams with the cells are all over the T's. Questions like this are all over the T's. And if it was highest to basic, would it be D? Absolutely. This would be highest to lowest or highest to most basic. Digestive system is the biggest. That's an organ system. Stomach. Zoom in, we see stomachs. Zoom into a stomach, we see tissues. Zoom into tissues, we see cells. So yes, highest to basic would be D. All right. Which of the following examples represents the most basic level of biological organization? Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's very easy because it's like organ system, organ, blah, 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 blah. But look, they're not saying cell, organ, they're giving you examples. So you're going to have to think about your knowledge of A and P, put it together with a little bit of common sense. Let's think through this. The most basic. When you see most basic, another way to think is smallest. Okay. Let's think about what we can eliminate here. Okay. Nervous system. That's going to be pretty big. Brain. That's pretty big too. Neuron. This is a tricky question because some folks might not know what a neuron is, right? A neuron is a word for a nerve cell. You see how this was a tricky question? It was a tricky question because they didn't say nerve cell. They try to get you by saying neuron. But a neuron is a nerve cell. Right? So you got to know that. You got to think back to A and P. Neuron is a nerve cell. So you know that's a cell. Now, what's gray matter? Okay. It's probably correct, right? A is probably correct. But what is gray matter? Gray matter is a type of tissue in the brain. But if you didn't know that gray matter was a type of tissue in the brain, you would have narrowed it down to A neuron or B gray matter. Okay, well, let's think about this just real quick. If you had this question on the T's, if you know neuron is a nerve cell, well, what comes under cells? We got organelles. Cells, zoom into cells, you see organelles. Stuff like mitochondria, nucleic acid, mitochondria, nucleus, stuff like that. Gray matter, that's not an organelle, right? Zoom into organelles, what do you begin to see? You begin to see macromolecules. Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids. Gray matter is not a macromolecule that you've learned about. So we can, even if you didn't know what gray matter was, you could probably say, well, I know it's not an organelle. I know it's not a macromolecule. So I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to choose neuron. And that's how you're going to choose that. Gray matter is a tissue. It is a collection of nerve cells. Okay. A. Got it. And I also want to show you sort of how to think through this, because sometimes on the T's, you'll be able to eliminate like 2 of the choices, but you won't know like the final one. So that's why I like to try to, that's why I try to like show you how to think through this. Michael, this test is pushing my hairline back. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's like it's aging you? That it's like stressing you out? Or is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I hope you're learning. Like I hope this is making sense. And if you didn't understand it before, I hope that stress. Oh man, I don't want you to be stressed. I don't want you to be stressed. You can rewatch this. You can rewatch this. It'll be on YouTube. I'll send out an email with this. But yeah, I don't want you to be stressed. Hopefully, after we've done a bunch of these questions, you'll begin to see the pattern and you'll know how to think through this, right? Because I can almost guarantee you're going to see a question like this, at least one on the T's. So you got it. I want you to learn this. I don't want you to lose your hair though. So, the smallest unit of life is known as A, cell, B, organelle, C, macromolecule, or D, virion. Now, what is this? Smallest unit of life. I'm going to tell you a mistake that a lot of people are going to make. I'm going to eliminate one. A lot of people are going to choose C. They're going to choose C. I'm going to cross it off because it's wrong, but a lot of people are going to say, oh, macromolecule, that's the smallest. It is the smallest. They're going to say, oh, a macromolecule is the smallest thing on this list. Yes, but not the smallest unit of life. The smallest unit of life is not the macromolecule. Because if you have a bunch of carbohydrates sitting in a beaker, you don't have life. Okay? That's not a living thing. If you have a bunch of lipids sitting in a beaker in a lab, it's not living. Right? A bunch of protein powder made of protein. Those are macromolecules. It's not living. So yes, macromolecule is the smallest thing in this list. It is not the smallest unit of life. An organelle, a virion is just one of those things that like the T's puts to confuse you. You probably don't even know what virions are. I always say don't choose anything that you don't recognize unless you've eliminated all the other answers. Okay? We're down between cells and organelles. And I'm going to tell you right now the answer is cell. The answer is cell. Some people are thinking, why is it not organelles? I'm going to tell you why. The smallest unit of life. A cell is the unit of life. All living things are made of cells. There are some living things that don't really have organelles. Okay? Cells. Cells. Cells make up all living things. An organelle by itself is not alive. And that is the important thing to know. An organelle on its own is not alive. And there are many living things like bacteria that don't really have organelles. They have a nucleus. No, they don't have a nucleus. What I wanted to say, they have a nucleoid. They have an area where there's DNA, but they don't have a nucleus, right? So there are living things like bacteria that don't have organelles. So if you're a living thing, you must be made of cells, but you do not need to have organelles. Does that make sense? So this was tricky. This was a little bit tricky, but I want you to get ready for it in case you see it on the T's. Virion, we have no idea what a virion is, so just get rid of it. The T's will give you stuff that's like super weird terms and stuff. I always say, don't pick something you don't understand unless you've eliminated everything else. Don't pick something that's unfamiliar. So smallest unit of life is a cell. A bacteria is made of cells. Bacteria are alive. They don't have organelles. Okay. Really, really, really. Yeah, ribosomes are present in some. Is a ribosome an organelle? Yeah, kind of, sort of, membrane-bound, or we usually say bacteria do not have membrane-bound nucleus or a membrane-bound organelle. Fair enough. But so bacteria obviously have to have ribosomes, they have to make protein, but generally an organelle on its own is not alive. So the smallest unit of life is known as a cell. It's just something you've got to learn. The smallest unit of life is a cell. Okay. Which the following can be found within tissues? Select all that apply. Organs, cells, organisms, macromolecules, or organ systems. Think about it for a minute. Remember, this is super important. Select all that apply. So it's probably going to be more than one. Let's think about our list. The first thing you want to do is you want to think about the list. All right, and here's our list. At the top is living organism. Zoom into a living organism. What do you see? Organ systems. Zoom into organ systems. What do you see? Individual organs. Zoom into organs. What do you see? You see tissues. Zoom into tissues. What do you see? You see cells. Zoom into cells. What do you see? You see macromolecules or chemicals or molecules. So where are we? We are here. Tissues. You zoom into tissues. What do you see? You see cells. You see macromolecules. Organs. Nope. Organs are up here. Nope. Organs contain tissues. Tissues do not contain organs. Cells. Yep. We're going to choose cells. Organisms. Absolutely not. Organisms are all the way up here. Organisms contain tissues. Tissues do not contain organisms. Cross it off. Macromolecules. Yes, macromolecules is down here. Organ systems? No way. Organ systems are up here. Okay, so this was tricky because it was a select all that apply. It wasn't just one correct answer, but it was multiple, and you weren't sure how many correct answers it was going to have. So you gotta have this table here committed to memory in your mind. Organisms, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, macromolecules. Macromolecules are then made of atoms, but that wasn't a choice here. Okay. Any questions? All right, let's move on. Ooh, look, it's another diagram. What is the highest level of biological organization represented in this diagram? Look carefully at the diagram and think about it. Okay. This is tricky. First time I saw this, I got the wrong answer because I just didn't know how to think about it the right way. Okay. So think about this. What is the highest level of biological organization represented in this diagram? Look at the diagram carefully. Now, somebody said, Kara said, it looks like skin. Yeah, if you know your anatomy, yes, it does look like skin. You don't need to know that it is skin to answer this question correctly. I will say that. You don't need to know that it's skin. So I am going to start talking through what we're going to see here. Okay. First, when we look at this, the first thing to pay attention to is that we see cells. Okay, we see cells. We see cells. Here's the thing. We see different kinds of cells. That is the key to this question. Different kinds of cells. For example, there is one type of cell here. There is another type of cell here. There's another type of cell here. Another type of cell here. And, well, other types of cells here. They certainly look different. They have a different appearance. Now, it's not that we're just seeing different kinds of cells. We're seeing groups of different kinds of cells. So we have, sometimes that happens here. Sometimes my iPad goes a little crazy. Sorry about that. Let me just make sure that, give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. Let's see, how does that look? That's better. There we go. Sorry about that. We have groups of cells. So we have one group here. Group of cells. We have another group of cells here. We have another group of cells here. We have another group of cells here. What do we call a group of cells? We call it a tissue. So this is one tissue. This is another tissue. This group of cells is another tissue. This group of cells is another tissue. This group of cells is another tissue. Okay? So we have multiple tissues. We have, depending on how you want to count, we have 3 or 4 different tissues. Because why am I? Well, because the top one is their dead cells. Is a little bit, some people are like, it's a tissue. It's not a tissue. I don't care about that. We can clearly see that there are different groups of cells. There are groups of different cells. Okay? So that means that we see groups of tissues, organ. Because we don't just see tissues. We see groups of tissues, which are organs. The first time I saw this question, I said B, because I was like, oh, look, they're tissues here. Yeah, there's a tissue, there's a tissue, there's a tissue. No, the T's, that's not what the T's wanted. The T's wanted me to say organ because it was saying the highest level of biological organization. There were cells or tissues, but all these tissues together made an organ. It's confusing. It's confusing. This is very similar to questions that the T's likes to ask. So we see, the point is we see different types of cells. Groups of cells are known as tissues. We have different tissues shown here. So we have an organ, we have a group of tissues. Okay. That question was kind of hard. That question was kind of hard because it's very, very similar to the kind of question you're going to see on the T's, right? I'm trying to give you questions that are very similar to the ones you're going to see on the T's. I mean, look, I have no idea what's going to show up on the T's, but I have a good idea of the type of questions that show up on the T's. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to just give you easy questions so that you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. No, I want to give you the hard stuff that you're going to see on the T's, so that when you see similar questions, you'll be able to crush them. That's my point. Why wouldn't it have been D? Why wouldn't it have been D? Why wouldn't it have been an organ system? Well, an organ system is a group of different organs that are all put together, right? So the integumentary system, which contains the skin, contains a number of different organs that are not just the skin, right? So we don't see, in order for it to be an organ system, we'd have to see different types of organs together, like the circulatory system, right? Where we would see the heart, we'd see the blood vessels. We'd see things like that. Okay. So for sure. Okay. All right. Now, listen, I don't want to embarrass anyone. I don't want to call anyone out, right? But something that I see in the chat that I don't like, I'm just gonna say it right now. Um, I don't like it when you say, "Oh yeah, that was so easy. That was so easy." Maybe it was easy for you, right? Good. If it was easy for you, good. Great. It doesn't mean it's easy for everybody else, right? So comments like that, they make you feel good and they make everyone else feel crappy. All right. So I'm just going to be honest. I ask you not to post questions, to post comments like that. Oh, it was so easy. I totally got it. Good for you. You got it. Other people didn't. And I'll just say that again. Comments like that make you feel good, but they make everybody else feel crappy. All right. And I know that may not be your intention, but I'm just asking, please, please, please. I don't have a lot of tolerance for people being like, oh, that was so easy. That, like, I don't know why you didn't get it. It was super easy. I don't appreciate that. And I'm gonna mute people who talk like that. This is a hard test. All right. And there are things that people really struggle with. Okay. Everybody struggles with different things. And anyone who is taking this test is doing something really brave. Anyone who is getting ready to take this test is doing something really brave. All right. And everybody has a different background, right? Everyone has a different background. There are things that are easy for some people that are hard for other people, right? Every person has stuff that they're really good at and stuff that they are really weak at. All right. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page on that. Okay. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So next one, viruses are considered to be non-living for a variety of reasons. One of these reasons is that they are not composed of what? Cells, proteins, macromolecules, or nucleic acids. Think about this for a sec. And I'll tell you right now, the answer is cells. Viruses are not made of cells. And if you're not made of cells, you're considered to be not living, right? All living things are made of cells. Are made of cells. All living things are made of cells. So, proteins, macromolecules, nucleic acids, there are things that contain those that are not alive. All right. So, if you don't have cells, you are not alive. Okay. So, it's important to know. Moving on. Oh, it's one of these questions again. Which of the following are correctly arranged from the highest to the most basic form of biological organization? Now, whenever you see a question like this, I always say, read this very, very carefully, because what are we doing? We're doing highest to most basic. You might remember that we did a problem like this a couple minutes ago, but it was the other way. So when we're doing highest to most basic, what we're doing is we're doing biggest, boom, 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 to smallest. Biggest to smallest. So biggest to smallest. So think about that for a sec. And yeah, Cara, I'll talk about viruses in a sec. It's really important to read this question right, because some people will get it wrong. The most common incorrect answer is going to be D, because an osteocyte is a cell. Then we have a tissue. Then we have the femur, which is an organ. And then we have the skeletal system. But that's going to be wrong, because people are going small to big. Cell, tissue, organ system. Ah, but the TEAS is asking for it the other way around, biggest to smallest. So the correct answer then is going to be A, skeletal system, femur, which is an organ, compact bone tissue, clearly this is a tissue, and an osteocyte. The important thing to remember here is that osteocyte is a cell. It's a type of cell in the bone. Okay. So the correct answer is A, biggest to smallest. Cara, you had a question going back here for just a minute about viruses. Well, we're going to talk more about viruses when we do microbiology. We'll do microbiology in maybe this week or next. But viruses are not considered living because for a number of reasons. One, they're not made of cells. Okay. But when we learn more about viruses, we'll see that they have a few characteristics. Viruses are considered to be not living because they can't grow on their own. They can't make energy on their own. They can't reproduce on their own. Viruses can only reproduce if they're inside of a living cell. That's the only way viruses can reproduce. Viruses cannot make their own energy. Viruses cannot grow. And so viruses are sort of parasites. They're a type of thing that cannot reproduce or get energy or grow when it's outside of a living thing. They cannot do any of those things on their own. Yes, they need a host cell. That's not true. No genetic material. No, they absolutely have genetic material. No, that is incorrect. Viruses absolutely have genetic material. Virus genetic material can be DNA or it can be RNA. So viruses absolutely have genetic material, but they cannot reproduce on their own without using a living cell. They have to be a parasite in a living cell in order to grow and reproduce. So Let's move on. What is the highest level of biological organization represented in this diagram? All right, check it out. Think about this. This definitely is like anatomy and physiology knowledge combined with a little bit of what we talked about a minute ago. At the end of the day, you have to know what this is. And so it's one of those questions where you kind of either know it or you don't. So the question is, what do we see here? I'll kind of start to give some hints. We see some axons. We see some dendrites. We see myelinated sheath. And that means that we are looking at a neuron, which is a nerve cell. So, answer is A. I think this is tricky for some people because if they don't know what they're looking at, they might think, oh, this is like, it's like the circulatory system, or this is the nervous system, or it's the lymphatic system, or so, right? It's got kind of all sorts of things all over the place. Or people might think, oh, it's an organ, it's like a spinal cord or something like. At the end of the day, you just have to be able to look at this and be like, oh, that's a neuron, and then it's a cell. Unfortunately, if you don't recognize this as a neuron, like there's not a whole lot that you can do. Michael, when you said all those make up the cell, what were you referring to? You meant like when I was saying like axon and dendrite and myelinated sheath. Those are just different parts of the cell. Those are different parts of the neuron. Yeah. So those are different parts of the neuron or nerve cell. We'll talk about those when we do anatomy and physiology a little bit later. But yeah, they're not organelles. They're not organelles, but they're just sort of like they're different they're different parts of it. So, which of the following is present in the object shown in the diagram below? Select all that apply. Okay. Which of the following is present in the object shown? Okay, let's think through this. What we see is, what do we see? We see a heart. And remember, select all that apply. So the heart. What is the heart of the levels of organization of things that we have in a living system? Heart is an organ. So, which is present in the object shown? Organs are made of different types of tissues. Tissues are made of different types of cells. Cells are made of different types of macromolecules. So, what are we thinking? Definitely tissues, definitely cells, definitely macromolecules. I think this question is not worded well because it's like, should it be organ too? The T says no. If a question like this were on the T's, it would probably say no. But it's not well worded because this is an organ. So it's like, is there an organ in the diagram? It's hard to know. Maybe I'll rewrite this question because I don't love it. It's like, should it be E? Probably, because it's like the thing in the picture is an organ, but it's definitely not an organ system. So cells, macromolecules, tissues. I'll think about it. I'll probably rewrite this question. What is the level of biological organization of the brain? Pretty easy. Pretty straightforward. If you get a question like this on the T's, awesome. It's like, you're lucky. Organ. The brain is an organ. Collection of tissues. Which of the following is a tissue? Ooh. Which of these is a tissue? Let's think about this. What is not a tissue? Let's start there. Integumentary system is not a tissue. Cross it off. Okay. Keratinocyte. What is that? It's a cell. If something ends in cyte, it is a cell. That is a great thing to know. You may know that cytology is a study of cells, or the examination of cells. Cyte, CYT equals cells. So whenever you see CYT, CYTE, we're talking about a cell. Okay, so that's definitely not a tissue. Okay, because it's a cell. Cyte, CYTE. We're talking about a cell. So now we need to choose between the epidermis and the skin. Well, you may not know everything about the integumentary system, but the epidermis, you probably know, is a part of the skin. And so that means that the skin, if you zoomed in, part of it is made of an epidermis. So an epidermis is a smaller part of the skin. Epidermis is a tissue. And the skin is an organ. Skin is an organ. The skin is composed of many different cells. Many different tissues. This was a diagram of the skin. It has different tissues, right? One of those tissues is the epidermis. One of those tissues is the epidermis. But the skin is an organ. It's a collection of many different tissues. So there we go. We have done 15. We have done 15 of these must-know questions about biological organization. And remember this diagram here: organisms, organ systems, organs, tissue, cells, organelles, molecules. But remember, it's not just about this diagram. It's not just about learning this do. It's learning to think through it. Because the TEAS is not going to give you this diagram and ask you to fill it in. The TEAS is going to ask you the kind of questions that we were looking at today. What living things are composed of. They're going to give you diagrams where you have to figure out whether you're looking at cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. You're going to have to know a little bit of anatomy and physiology to be able to figure out whether words and terms they give you, whether they are cells, tissues, organs, stuff like that. And to keep in mind things that are at the high or basic level of biological organization. This, as I said before, is one of those places where a little bit of a knowledge of anatomy and physiology has to be combined with the knowledge of this diagram here. You got to put your anatomy and physiology knowledge together with this diagram, and then you're going to need to put that together with, as I often say, a little bit of common sense to figure out how to answer questions like this. So before we wrap up today, it was just about an hour. That's perfect. I thought this would take just about an hour. Before we wrap up today, are there any questions, anything that I can help with? I think, as I said, tomorrow we're going to do cells. I'll send out some information on that later. I will post this soon, later today when I get to this. I will post it. What questions, any questions you can have? Any questions? Any questions? Questions that I can help with? If you have any questions, you can always send me an email at tyler@ teas in one day.com. And if you like how I teach, you can get my chemistry full course. I have a full course on all the chemistry that you need to know on the teas, and you can get that at teasinOneday.com. All right. So that is my email address. The keratinocyte cell, where's that present? It's present in your skin. Do you have any videos on the role of microorganisms in disease? Not yet, but I'll be doing a live stream in a couple days where we'll talk through that. Where can we find more questions like these? You can find more questions like these at my website, teasinOneday.com. I have hundreds of must-know questions for the teas in science. Protein, to talk about protein. We'll talk about protein in a couple days, next week maybe. Do I teach math? Not yet, but maybe I will. Maybe I will. I'm first trying to cover all the science that you need for the teas, and then I will maybe start doing math. I don't know. I'll figure out what I want to do next. I just want to make a product. What I'm doing is I'm trying to build this product. I'm trying to build a product to help people pass the teas, particularly the science part. I think that just honestly, like the videos that I see on the teas, I just don't think they're very good. I don't think they help people learn. They're okay. There's some that are better than others, but I just my heart really goes out to people who are taking the teas because I know it's a hard test, and when I look at the materials, the books and the videos that are out there and the websites, I honestly just don't think that like many of them are any good, right? Like it's like I understand why people are like failing they like study and they fail they take the teas and they fail it like over and over again, and they're like, I'm studying from this book and I'm studying from this video, I read this on Facebook and stuff, and then I look at the books and I look at the video and it's like, this stuff is crap. Like, no wonder nobody's learning from it. So like, yeah, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm not trying to like insult anybody, but I just don't think that there are a lot of good resources out there for studying for the teas. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make live streams. I'm trying to make products and videos that will actually help people study, that will be affordable and that will be helpful. And that's what I'm trying to do. So yeah. So check out my website, teasinOneday.com. I have stuff that's free, like this live stream. I have free stuff on YouTube. I also have a short course that you can pay for. It's like $10. And yeah, I'm trying to make stuff that helps people for the teas, that is like actually you can learn from, and it's actually affordable. And I just don't think that there's like either of those things out there right now. So let me know if I can help. If you have any specific questions, send me emails, check out my website, whatever I can do to help. All right. I will talk to you later. I will send you an email and let me know. I will let you know the next time that I do a live stream. All right. Take it easy. Have a great day.